Welcome to Football's Golden Oldies from the Toll House in Lancaster. The ghost of Hart Lane. I'd seen him play just over 12 months before, in March 1963, when Margaret and I were in London on our honeymoon, and the headlines were quite shocking. Not on the scale of the Munich disaster, but this time it was a Tottenham Hotspur player, my team. The front page of the Daily Mirror on July 22nd, 1964 told the story along with a heartbreaking photo of John with his wife Sandra and their young children, Amanda, aged 2, and Rob. His son Rob was just 6 months old when his father died, and he eventually wrote a book with author Julie Welch called The Ghost in Search of My Father, the Football Legend. Let's begin with a quote. Had John White lived, he would have been one of the greatest footballers of all time. That was Jimmy Greaves' reaction. I remember where I was on Tuesday, July 21st, 1964, hearing the news that John had been killed by a lightning strike. It left you feeling quite numb and struggling to comprehend that these tragedies could happen. Dave Mackay and Bill Nicholson simply broke down and cried, as did countless other people, I'm sure. My memory is fairly good, and if I remember correctly, the number one song in the charts was It's All Over by the Rolling Stones. You couldn't make it up, could you? Where it all started. John Anderson White was born on April 28, 1937, and had two brothers, Eddie and Tom, who were also professional footballers. He first played for Alloa Athletic under manager Jerry Kerr and made his debut in the 56-57 season, and in 68 league appearances he scored 26 goals for the Wasps. The John White Lounge is still a feature at the Clackmannanshire Club's ground. John is seated third from the left on the front row. Notice the players are wearing different socks. Three brothers, all professionals. When Rob visited Alloa to find out about his dad, he met a guy called Laurie, whose dad grew up 5 doors away from the White family in Musselburgh. Laurie had brought an older cousin along with him, who had vague memories of John, Eddie and Tommy, and they were chatting at the bar when Rob asked, "What do you do for a living?" The cousin gave Rob a strange look and said, "I knew this was going to come up and I've been dreading telling you. Basically, I fit lightning conductors." That is something you couldn't make up unless you were writing an offbeat programme for television. Rob thought his dad would find that answer hilarious. Transfer target. In August 1958, Falkirk bought John for £3,300 and we see him running out on his debut. Alex Parker and Eddie O'Hara had been jointly sold to Everton 2 months before, giving Falkirk a cash injection of £18,000. John played alongside Doug Moran and in 30 appearances he scored 11 goals, but his stay at the club was relatively short, moving to Tottenham early in his second season. Bill Nicholson had asked Danny Blanchflower about John White after Scotland had beaten Northern Ireland 4-0 in Belfast, and Danny said, "If you can buy him, don't wait a moment, he's a wonderful player." Nicholson immediately flew to Scotland and clinched the deal. Scotland debut while at Falkirk. John made his debut for Scotland against West Germany on May 6, 1959 and scored in the first minute, leading his country to a 3-2 victory. John is second from the left on the front row, next to Ian St John, and behind his goalkeeper Bill Brown, who would be John's teammate at Spurs, as well as the formidable Dave Mackay far right on the back row. Becoming more well known, John gained 4 full caps when he was at Falkirk, playing in the first and last of those games alongside Dave Mackay. The 4th game was against Northern Ireland in Belfast, featuring Danny Blanchflower on October 3rd, 1959. White scored his second international goal in a 4-0 win for Scotland, and he's seen wearing an Irish shirt. John is seen in the Scotland jersey with his friend Dennis Lowe, and in the Northern Ireland jersey, which he exchanged with an opponent. Bill Nicholson was still not sure because John was so frail. John's frail appearance had been the cause of considerable concern, resulting in a number of English First Division clubs choosing not to risk signing him. I find that unbelievable, actually. If they'd have done their research, they would have found out why. Nicholson sought reference from the army and was told by John's commanding officer that he was a celebrated cross-country runner and a PT instructor who could run forever. After rave reviews from Blanchflower and Mackay, Nicholson signed him in October 1959 for £20,000. How would he fare in London? Spurs fans did not see the best of John in his early outings, as he was completing his national service in Berwick, training on his own before facing a 700-mile round trip for home games. When he was able to finally move down to London, the improvement was plain for all to see. Tommy Harmer was a terrific player with a love of dribbling, which tended to slow play down, so Nicholson dropped him and gave John the number 8 shirt. With his perfect balance, incisive passing and ceaseless work rate and prompting, John made the whole team operate smoothly. He was not an eye-catching player or one for the spectacular, but when the ball hit the back of the net, a quick analysis of the move that led to the goal would invariably show that White had been involved somewhere along the line. Sensational as he settled in. Short and or long, his passes were inch perfect. He could run with the ball at pace, shielding it from opponents until the precise second came to release him. He scored on his debut in October '59 against Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough in a 2-1 defeat. His success mainly lay in a combination of skills, his passing, his ball control, which helped sustain the attacking momentum of the team. So too, his runs to find space off the ball, arriving unexpectedly in the opposition's penalty area, which resulted in the White Hart Lane faithful giving him the nickname, the Ghost. His friend Cliff Jones said he was a great talent. Many inside forwards need bringing into the game, whereas John White could bring himself into a game. If you're not in possession, get in position. That was John White. He was always available if you needed to pass to someone. Secret son of John White. The couple in the faded photograph are newly in love. He is smartly dressed and wraps a protective arm around her. She wears a fashionable coat and a scarf covers her head, but not her prettiness. The picture also holds a heartbreaking secret, which is why it has been buried in a dusty album for over 60 years. The romance between 19-year-old lone dread girl Ellen McLean and John White, a 23-year-old doing his national service with the King's Own Scottish Borderers, was never spoken about by their families. That was because Just weeks after the photograph was taken in 1959, Helen became pregnant and was deserted by John, who never saw their son Stephen, now 65. In love. 23-year-old Spurs player John White with Helen McLean is just 19, shortly before he left her, but what makes this story extraordinary is that John White was not a boy from Helen's hometown of Berwick-on-Tweed, but a legendary footballer who played for Tottenham Hotspur in Scotland, but died aged just 27. He was nicknamed the Ghost for his ability to glide past players and materialise unexpectedly in the opposition's penalty area. He went on to score 40 goals in 183 games, earning £100 a week. This figure is incorrect in the book because he was earning £20 a week when he came to Spurs, but paid Helen just £1 a week towards the cost of bringing up Stephen. The story of White's secret son might have remained buried had Robert not written about it in The Ghost of White Hart Lane, a new book about his father's life. The resulting publicity forced Stephen's mother to confirm for the first time what he had long suspected, and he said the revelation was a relief rather than a surprise, because he had amassed a jigsaw of evidence about John White. Stephen's view. Speaking from his Berwick home, Stephen says, "As a footballer, I put John White on the same pedestal as my heroes George Best and Diego Maradona. But as a man, I can't even think of him as a man. For to be a man, you have to be responsible for your actions, and if you're not prepared to do that, then you're weak." Deep down, the football lover in me thinks it's a tiny bit special, but I never think of him as Dad. The best I would call him is Father, out of respect. John met Helen in Lamb's Laundrette, just yards from Berwick Barracks, and pestered her for a date. But Robert White's book unkindly calls Helen the local man trap and portrays White as foolish and naive. But Stephen insists John was his mother's first boyfriend, and they courted for almost 18 months, with Helen visiting John's parents in Musselburgh, where the photograph was probably taken. Helen says she remembers nothing about their relationship, and maybe it is better to let sleeping dogs lie, a proverb from the 13th century, a request for an incident to remain undiscussed or avoided, as addressing it may cause trouble. John White did not fail. John White was at Tottenham from 59 to 64, 5 seasons, and in that time he missed 15 matches. How many of those 15 did Spurs win? They won just one. That piece of information wasn't in his book or anywhere else that I could find, but it came to me in a conversation with Cliff Jones, a real friend of John's. King's Cross, a wintry Friday evening in 1959, a slim, pallid lad joins the line of people streaming along the platform after getting off the Glasgow train. They might conclude he's a soldier on weekend leave. He is, a special one with a 48-hour pass to play for Tottenham Hotspur. He's been making this journey for 2 months now, and the city still seems like a foreign country. And while Dave Mackay barged in and made an immediate impact on everybody, he was just a slim lad who didn't say a lot, says Terry Dice. Even Cliff Jones, who became his best friend, said he was just there. Slow start, but found his touch after being subjected to 2 bewildering high-pressure months. John White made his first appearance for the Tottenham public on Saturday. It was difficult in the early stages of their introduction to determine who was the more disillusioned. Pale, slightly built, White looked as ill at ease as a Pioneer Corps private suddenly posted to Sandhurst. The crowd, apparently anticipating another dynamic Caber and Claymore character of the Dave Mackay calibre, remained dishearteningly silent. Ian Woodridge, the Daily Mail, said all this in October 24th, 1959. Some reports from 59-60. October 21st versus Nottingham Forest. John White showed that he is the best Scottish forward to hit London since the great Alex James started his brilliant career with Arsenal 30 years ago, leading Spurs to a 2-1 victory. That was Alan Holby of the Daily Express. The Forest manager, Billy Walker, said his accuracy is something special. He didn't put our lads in possession once, and that takes a lot of doing. November 1st at Man City. Inside left John White was just red hot. He burned his way through the City defence with searing football in a 2-1 victory. November 29th at Blackpool. It was White who really showed Spurs the way to turn clever approach work into goals and a 3-2 win. December 6th against Blackburn. The attention given by Rovers to White was a tribute to the almost academic artistry and imagination of this most promising young Scot, who led them to a 2-1 win. December 19th versus Newcastle. Playing on the right wing, John White demonstrated a foot skill and artistry which, joined to his superb positional sense, stamp him as a great footballer in the making. And thanks to him, Tottenham pulled off a stunning 4-0 victory. John was in a strange city. John's disconnection and quiet despair could have carried on indefinitely. Instead, as the new year got underway, fate stepped in. It took the form of an invitation to Sunday lunch with Harry Evans, Tottenham's assistant manager, and his family. This kind and sympathetic gesture, which he repeated intermittently over the rest of the season, was to have far-reaching consequences and gave John his first real anchor in London. And John would eventually marry Harry Evans' daughter. But it wasn't simply fatalistic stoicism that drove him forward. There is a sort of incandescent enthusiasm that was peculiar to Terry Dyson. Cliff Jones' almost knee-jerk bravery, Bobby Smith's brash, bruising swagger. There is a deep competitiveness mediated by calm celebration. That was Danny Blanchflower's way. As for Dave Mackay, he wanted to win so fiercely that he pushed his body very close to destruction and turned Tottenham's fortunes round as a result. John was a quiet, self-effacing personality, but he had prodigious ability. The conundrum was that so did others, but they hadn't made it. He stood apart from them because when the chips were down, he had the merciless, unyielding, steely core of desire, the resolute determination to go on when weaker souls were prepared to admit defeat. It's hard to identify the exact turning point, but one day stands out. February 27th, 1960. Spurs were leading the championship table by a point when they took on Blackburn Rovers at Ewood Park. Spurs won 4-1. Smith, Mackay, Allen and Jones were the scorers. John, who had made 3 of the goals, was acknowledged to be the man of the match. He was no longer simply a promising young player. That day, he imposed himself on the game. A world-beating midfield, Blanchflower, Mackay, White. The press were already speculating that here was a world-beating midfield in the making, and that Spurs now had a team capable of doing the double. In the words of one reporter at Ewood Park, a championship-winning look beamed from the face of every player. Saturday, April 23rd, 1960 at Molineux is not a day or place to be a Wolves supporter. 3-1 does not begin to convey the extent of the crushing. The game belongs to Tottenham Hotspur. 3 goals by Bobby Smith, Dave Mackay and Cliff Jones are all made by the sustained, stunning approach work of John White and Danny Blanchflower in midfield. press, bash away at their typewriters. Blanchflower in dazzling form, and the little Scottish inside right John White, who had a superb match. The league title can only go to Wolves or Burnley now, as often happens. Once players have been released from their fear of failure, all tiredness and tension has gone, but that's not been the only difference about Spurs today though. One significant player is missing, Tommy Harmer. But who was Tommy Harmer? Somewhere in the Pathy News archives is a black and white clip, so old it practically has whiskers, of a skinny little footballer with a massive hairdo that seems too heavy for his body when you look at his shorts, baggy and huge over spindly legs. The effect is of a tent with a couple of ropes trailing outside. You're inclined to ask if he was wearing them for a bet. The player is Tommy Harmer, the match long forgotten. None of the famous names he played with and against, Danny Blanchflower, Stanley Matthews, Johnny Haynes, Billy Wright, are in evidence. Because he's alone on the pitch and the clip rolls in slow motion, the effect is closer to a ballet performance than a display by a top-level footballer. Graceful, sinewy, controlled movement. His feet are as sensitive as fingertips, but their grip on the ball is almost prehensile in its strength. To generations who have grown up on exhibitions of brainlessly running domestic players who can't trap the ball first time, it's a masterclass. Tommy was a crabbed, nervous, scrawny East Ender who never weighed much more than 9 stone. To the journalist Brian Glanville, who says, like a tiny mobile signal box, guiding and switching the play, he would juggle with the ball, elude defenders, send his team on the attack with a perfectly judged pass. In Bill Nicholson's first game as manager of Tottenham, they beat Everton 10-4. Tommy scored 1 goal and made the other 9. Armour the Charmer by Alan Holby of the Sunday Express. Tommy's quirks, their legend has outlived him, included a unique way of taking penalty kicks. He would run up to the ball sideways on, turn and screw it back across the goalkeeper. The trick shots that were part of his armoury were those familiar to a tennis player: backspins, swerves, dinks and benders, huge blistering passes down the middle, raking crossfield balls to the wings. According to Brian Glanville, he and the fluent, flamboyant Blanchflower could scarcely have been different characters, but on the field they balanced one another perfectly, each a technically accomplished, highly intelligent footballer, given to holding the ball before making shrewd use of it. Cliff Jones remembers, he had to have a cigarette before a game. If he didn't have one, he was a complete wreck. By the 59-60 season, he was approaching his 32nd birthday, all in footballer's years. No stopping Tommy as he makes 4. Ken Jones in the Daily Mirror on December 24, 1959 wrote, "In ankle-deep slush, Tommy Harmer had Newcastle United dizzy with his body swerves and close control. He made all 4 goals in a 4-0 victory that sent Spurs back to the top of the First Division." Somewhere between the end of March and May, Nicholson had started playing John at inside right in Tommy's place, and Spurs' last game of the season at home to Blackpool finished 4-1, with John wearing the number 8 shirt, scoring his first goal. If Tommy was a nearly man, the 59-60 team was the nearly side, one good enough for David Lacey to nominate it in 2009 in The Guardian as one of his 5 beautiful teams of the last 50 years. The others were Real Madrid 59-60, Real Zaragoza 65-66, the Brazil World Cup winning team of 1970 and the Ruud Gullit era Milan of 1988-89, which shows how good Tottenham were in 1959-60. Armour with the ball was a menace to a defence such as post-war footballers seldom know, but Tommy without the ball was too often a passenger, whereas White could lose a marker at will, and he had a wider vision of the game than Tommy ever had. That July, just before the start of the double season, Tommy made his last first team appearance. John was still in Bury, a month away from being demobbed, but when the season began it was John who was wearing the number 8 shirt and running the forward line. That October, Tommy was sold to Wolf. Tommy Harmer made 222 appearances and scored 51 goals. A terrific player who missed his first Spurs championship under Arthur Rowe and the second championship under Bill Nicholson. So unlucky. Tommy Harmer, dimmed but never forgotten. You can see Tommy in the dressing room with his cigarette. When Tommy Harmer is spoken of these days, and he still is, he's usually tagged as an unlucky player, the one who missed the party like the guy dropped from the Beatles just before they became famous. Remembering him like this would be a pity. It's a bit corny to say that, though he was small, he was a giant. But for the generation who saw what he could do, there's no better word. Julian Holland says, Harmer was a truly great player. His tragedy was that his gifts were never fully suited to the type of play current at Tottenham. Under Rowe, he was too subtle and too static. Under Anderson, he was denied colleagues quick and responsive enough to turn his genius into championship-winning football. Under Nicholson, he lacked the mobility that the new manager looked for, nor could he supply the rapid touches that Nicholson knew were necessary to overcome planned, coherent defences in 1961. Tommy seems part of an era that is becoming as far away from us as mangles and spinning wheels, the days of wizards of the dribble and mud-clogged boots, of ball juggling inside forward, and here's Tommy picking his way over cold wintry quagmires of January mud and floodlights as brilliant as planets in black city skies, controlling a sodden bundle of leather and stitches as if it was as delicate as a chrysanthemum. Photo shows Tommy listening to Arthur Rowe. White is the star. Brilliant Spurs create a record start to their season by gaining their 10th successive win over Aston Villa 6-2. In front of 61,000 fans, they were irresistible, adding a killing venom to their usual poison skill. Their forwards, who were orchestrated by man of the match John White, were 5 white-shirted sprites darting in and out of Villa's heavy-footed defenders, reported Bernard Joy of the London Evening Standard on September 24th, 1960. Every reporter was raving about John White. This supreme ball artist inspired Spurs with delicate artistry, while the Sunday Express said it's White, that cunning, immaculate genius, and the Daily Express commented John White was the very poetry of soccer. John was a transformed player, no more 700-mile round trips from Berwick to London as his national service was finished. Father figures come in all shapes and sizes, from Gregory Peck as a lawyer, Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, to John Canby in Cool Running, but it's highly unlikely that you would ever come up with Harry Evans, assistant manager to Bill Nicholson. It began on the 1960 August Bank Holiday weekend when John arrived, having just been demobbed from the army, and the club wasn't able to arrange a bed for the night, as all the landladies Spurs used were away on holiday. So Harry, who happened to walk through reception at the moment of crisis, offered to put him up in the spare bedroom. His daughter Sandra said it was meant to be for a couple of nights, but we could never get rid of him. John would soon marry Sandra to complete the fairy tale. Harry Evans, tubby, dark-haired and warm-hearted. Harry Evans was the archetypal backroom man, an ex-player whose jocular boast was, "I kept Alf Ramsey out of the Southampton side, you know," and Nicholson had made him his assistant towards the end of the 58-59 season. Tony Markey said, "He was about 5'8", tall and very jovial, and he helped Bill such a lot doing the office work, so Bill could do the coaching and the training. That was his love. Always seemed happy, got things done quietly, no fuss and bother, and he was very diplomatic. He could smooth over things." Harry was orphaned at 2 years of age in the Spanish flu epidemic, so seeing John White in the foyer of White Hart Lane looking lost must have struck a chord with Harry. Sandra said, "I'd been brought up around footballers in Aldershot. It was a friendship. They were mates, but my dad definitely took John under his wing, and John modelled himself on him, like doing the washing up, like Dad did." It wasn't only that Harry provided the kind, manly support that John needed to thrive in the cauldron of professional football, and it didn't take long after his arrival at Berkeley Gardens for John and Sandra to fall in love and announce their engagement. You can see that in the photograph. Look how they flocked to Spurs. This was the Saturday morning headline in the Daily Express sports pages of October 1st, 1960, over an announcement of a slump in attendances. They are more than 1.25 million down throughout the league compared to the first 5 weeks of the previous season. Spurs were playing at Molineux on this day, and Alan Hobie of the Sunday Express said, "Quicksilver White has a wonder match in another dazzling display of regal elegance and artistry. Spurs preserved their 100% record by grinding Wolves into the damp Molineux grass. The jam-packed 53,000 crowd saw the football team of the season as these magical masters from Tottenham strutted and strolled their way to their 11th consecutive victory." Irish right half Danny Blanchflower at his impeccable best, directing the one-way traffic, and Scottish inside right John White flitting irrepressibly here, there and everywhere. He's pale, he's frail, but not only has he the uncanny brilliance of the Continentals, in his quicksilver ability to flit unnoticed into the open spaces, he reminds me of the great Wilf Mannion. Watch this White. He's only 23 and he's going to be one of the great ones. Wolves were taken apart by 3 master surgeons called Blanchflower, Markey and White. Les Allen said, "That's why John is worth millions. He was all over the field." Troutman stops Spurs. October 10th, a midweek game, and the unbeaten run comes to an end with a 1-1 draw against Manchester City, reportedly almost wholly down to Bert Troutman. Then 2 weeks later at the City ground, Nottingham Forest are crushed 4-0. Les Allen spots John, unmarked, in the middle, and it's a study in cool artistry as he chips the ball neatly over the goalkeeper into the net, as if he had used a niblick. There is the bonfire night game against Fulham, where Spurs go in at half-time 2-0 up through Allen and Jones. Then in the last 15 minutes, it's an onslaught. The 5-1 win offers more proof, says the Evening Standard, of the rapport established by John and Danny. Their strongest point was the ability of Blanchflower and White to divert the point of attack onto Fulham's weak points. Johnny Scotland's flitting inside right, a dazzling schemer. Danny Blanchflower and his men have developed the power in defence and attack to combat the worst of the weather and the mental toughness to withstand the strain of the big occasion. Finally, Spurs had a bad day at Hillsborough, where the unbeaten run ends in a 2-1 defeat by Sheffield Wednesday. It's November 12th and their 17th game of the season. Significantly, Blanchflower and White failed to get the forward line buzzing. So many descriptions of a wonderful player. Tottenham's final game of 1960 at White Hart Lane, and it's Spurs 5, Blackburn Rovers 0. The goals are scored by Les Allen 2, Bobby Smith 2 and Danny Blanchflower. As you read through the match reports over 60 years on, you get the strongest impression possible of how John did it. He was unmarked in the middle. He flits unnoticed. He had the genius of appearing at the most unexpected but most productive points of action. From the descriptive point of view, some of it makes florid reading. The delicate dynamite of the Pimpernel player, John White, Spaceman White. This Scot always manoeuvres in the open spaces. But when did John's nickname first appear? You need to go back again through the match reports of the double season and you find the theme begins to pick up. He's a wraith and a phantom. He's frail looking. By the end, though, the answer is provided by an ancient clipping from the 5th round cup game against Aston Villa on February 18, 1960, that said, "And with John White, the wandering ghost, in far better form than last week." The cutting frustratingly has no byline, though from the look of the typeface and layout, the poor ran in the Sunday Express. Perhaps it isn't surprising that, like a lot else to do with John, its origin is vague and elusive, with the name of whoever coined it lost in the mists of time. Immortality. By the start of the year, 1961, they had 25 games behind them, 22 wins, 2 draws and a solitary defeat, scoring 81 goals, but by the time they faced Charlton Athletic in the FA Cup 3rd round, they took the field with a line of battered bodies. Terry Dyson hobbled through the Charlton match. Spurs won 3-2. Physios never had any training there. Twist an ankle, they'd get you to put it in a bucket of freezing water or just rub it with oils. Spurs beat Crewe 5-1 in the 4th round, but the next game at home to Wolves, who quickly went down to 10 men after their centre-half endured the Bobby Smith experience, taking away to have his ribs strapped up after colliding with Smith, who scored Spurs' only goal in a 1-1 draw. 5 minutes after half-time, a roaring inferno of sound erupted from the packed bowl of Roker Park in the 5th round FA Cup. Sunderland, 1 goal down and fighting like red and white striped furies, had majestic Spurs rocking back on their educated heels, said Alan Hobie of the Sunday Express, as the final score of 1-1 in March 1961 indicates. Abruptly after that day at Roker, a corner was turned. It's impossible to identify what it was. Perhaps recovery from fatigue or the sudden awareness of the lighter days, but after weeks of struggling to find his touch, a burst of energy propelled John forward. His mojo was working again. The road to Wembley. It sounds miraculous to the point of absurdity, but in the replay with Sunderland, Spurs won 5-0. Everything John did went right. Goals from Allen, 2 from Terry Dyson, Smith and Mackay, but it was John, that flitting genius, who set them all up. White, who with Blanchflower fashioned the stream of fantasies of soccer, which streamed from Spurs, amid all the hubbub one man stood out, the frail-looking White, at his impeccable best. It would be going too far to say everything was easy from then on, just before the cup semi-final against Burnley. Spurs lost 3-2 at Cardiff, but at Villa Park on March 18th, Tottenham safely negotiated the obstacle of Burnley 3-0, so Spurs would meet Leicester City at Wembley. If they gave up now, they would be known forever as the side that bottled it, brilliant but spineless. All that thinking and training and innovation would be thrown away. Everything they'd worked for since pre-season training back in July, all they'd gone through physically, exhaustion, cuts, bruises, knocks, sweat and pain. If they failed at the last moment, it wouldn't be because they didn't have the talent, it would be because they didn't have the nerve. Proof that even the most outstanding team in the land couldn't do it because the double was impossible. At Easter they made their decision. Immortality it had to be. A record Easter treble. Good Friday, White Hart Lane, Spurs 4, Chelsea 2. Easter Saturday, White Hart Lane, Spurs 5, Preston North End 0. White, that slim perfectionist, is drifting secretly to the left wing as he was in the best days of old. Easter Monday, Stamford Bridge, Chelsea 2, Spurs 3. The following Saturday at St Andrews, Birmingham 2, Spurs 3. April 15, for what was nominally the title decider at White Hart Lane against Sheffield Wednesday, who took the lead after 29 minutes through Don Megson. The tension pulled Spurs away from their fluent, fierce football, making them slightly hesitant, fractionally inaccurate. Both sides were terrifying in the tackle. Mackay had his name taken. Jones had 2 stitches in his knee, but the title was clinched in 2 minutes of brilliant mayhem. 3 minutes before half-time, Terry Dyson beat Peter Swan in the air and laid a header back to Bobby Smith, who volleyed it home. 1 minute later, Maurice Norman headed a free kick down to Les Allen, whose right foot produced the championship sealing goal. Half the double was theirs, now for the other half. Wembley beckons. Those glory days. Bill Nicholson and the rest of the Spurs team celebrate winning the First Division in 1961, the first half of the double. Half the double was theirs, now for the other half. By the week of the final, Spurs had lost 2 of the last 3 league games. It was easy to make a case for Leicester, who had been the first side to beat Spurs in a league game that season. The day before the final, they'd gone to Wembley. Cliff Jones remembers, John was doing a commentary in a Kenneth Wolstenholme voice. The ball comes floating across to White on the 18-yard line and he rifles up the ball past Banks. White has scored 5 minutes after the kick-off. So what happened? A final ruined by an injury. In fact, the final itself was frustratingly mundane and anticlimactic. The Wembley pitch felt as though they were playing on cushions. They had so much adrenaline, they felt choked by it. Spurs found the Leicester defence hard to crack. Then, with 18 minutes gone, right back Len Chalmers turned into a tackle with Les Allen, who caught his leg, and from then on, Chalmers was a passenger on the wing. Cliff Jones commented, it wasn't a very good game. After the injury, Leicester shut the space down a lot more and made it hard for us to play. Johnny and Danny weren't really involved. The real action happened in the second half. Dyson made a pass to Smith. Bobby saw Banks move one way, so he changed his mind, shot the other way and fell over. It was only when his pals began to thump him on the back that Bobby realised he'd scored. After 77 minutes, Terry Dyson met a centre from Bobby Smith to head the second goal, and 2 minutes later, as if to symbolise Leicester's acceptance of defeat, Len Chalmers hobbled off the pitch. And that was that, the final whistle, the double done. There'd be no more challenges, no more vital games, only a grudging acknowledgement from Bill Nicholson. Journalist Ken Jones said Nicholson was so dissatisfied with them over the game. He just felt they hadn't played, but when John and Cliff went up to collect their medals, they looked like they were in paradise. They all do, and it was paradise. Groundbreaking achievement. Because the double has become a relatively commonplace achievement in modern football, it's taken for granted that any club with financial resources to buy the world's best players and maintain a vast squad should manage it. You tend to overlook how groundbreaking it was in 1961. Clubs have been trying since Aston Villa in 1897 in a much smaller league and different circumstances, but no one could bring it off, and many clubs came very close. It was like walking on the moon or building a city in the sea, an impossible dream. Only an extraordinary, exceptional group of men, Danny Blanchflower's belief, brought it to fruition. That's the end of part 1 on John White.